Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with you today for a discussion about the upcoming book, Disruption by Muhammad Sani Dattijo. Muhammad Sani Dattijo is well known in Kaduna State, so I'll just give you a brief introduction. He has worked in various capacities, first as part of the team that, for the Millennium Development Goals in Abuja. After that, he worked at the UN, rubbing shoulders with the likes of Jeffrey Sachs. And then he became a commissioner under Kaduna State Government, Commissioner of Budget and Planning, and later the Chief of Staff, all under the current governor of Kaduna State, whose name I can't quite recall at the moment. Can someone help me? So now his current position or his role, he is the APC candidate for Zone 2 Senatorial District. So please give him a round of applause. He's somebody that we are very, very proud of. So the first thing I'll do is to ask you what informed your decision to call your book Disruption. I know it's a word that, of course, would make people curious to read the book, which is good. That's what publishers like, because they want a book that will be on the bookshelf amongst other books, and when a prospective buyer is looking, the title and, of course, the front page design will catch the eye of the prospective reader. So tell us a little about that, please.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm not sure what to call you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Let me be safe. I had tried to chase Her Excellency down for the last 3 weeks to ensure that I'm not intimidated executively and to make this as friendly as possible, but she did not let me know what to call her, so I'll stick to Your Excellency. Thank you very much. I think that I started writing, I think, around 2018, and it's taken me this long, both because of personal, professional, and global reasons that have resulted in the name of the book. When I started writing, that wasn't going to be the name at all. It was probably going to be something very boring and policy sounding. But in between that, when I started writing, and as you'll see from the very first chapter, I discovered through my journey that for anything really good to happen, both on a personal level and at the level of governance, there needs to be some level of shock to the system, whether personal or professional. And you know, I was talking to my wife yesterday, and I was trying to predict your questions. And I think one of the ones that she asked me was, you know, disruption, why? And I ended up with, you know, one thing that all of us can connect with here in the room is children, right? Everybody likes children. They look very nice. Everybody is proud of their children. But as somebody who has been in the delivery room for 4 of my boys, the delivery process is not beautiful. Right? Nobody tells you that. Everybody tells you about the very beautiful baby that has been born. But nobody tells you about that really disruptive process, both physically and mentally, about how a child comes into earth, right? Everybody skips that part. And really, what I've discovered while working in Kaduna and before is the beauty that you see in Kaduna today, for example, came with breaking a lot of eggs. The governor, our leader, is, the number one disruptor I know in Nigeria, for example, right? And it is only through those processes. So my own simple definition of disruption is that we are all usually pre-programmed to a set of behaviors that we don't even know, right? And the disruption that's required is a shock to the system that changes that pre-programmed behavior to something that takes you much higher, to something that takes you to another level of development. And so at the end of the day, when I looked at the process, and then while I was writing in the middle of all of that, COVID happened, right? And COVID, I think the most popular word at that time was disruption, right? And it seems so apt that both from a personal, which I can come to later, and professional and governance standpoint, it appeared that disruption should be more of our norm. I think in the past, people that have been really interested in government and governance and public policy have stuck to the issue of reform. But what happens with reform is that it's usually very slow and very painful. It's like when you put wax on your body and you put sellotape, right? To remove hair. You imagine taking it off very, very slowly. It's very painful, right? So it's much better sometimes to yank it off. And I think that yanking off to a fresh space in your skin is that disruptive process.
Thank you very much. So what I would like you to talk about next is what informed your decision, or what made you feel compelled to write down all these things that you have done.
I will give you the honest story. I came to the first Kabafest a couple of years ago. And I noticed that the only people that were looked at with any importance were the authors. So I swore to myself that I was going to end up here. And so here I am. But more seriously, when I came into government, I was appointed commissioner at 35. Which I think was still pretty young for that time. I mean, many people thought it was pretty young for that time. And from the first day I went into office, all the way to my first year, there was this wonder from people that were my age or younger, or even a bit older, about how it was for someone like me navigating government, right? And there wasn't anything really for me to lay my hands on. And I wanted to make it easy for someone else that's coming. I'm hoping that people in the room will have the sort of opportunities that I had, or some have even had them. But when you do get that kind of opportunity, there's something that can guide you. I tried to put a lot of interesting stories in the book. So things that will guide you to really understanding how government is on the inside, but also because I was coming from international development space, I realized that a lot of the things that all these international agencies thought about why states don't develop or countries don't develop was actually wrong. A lot of the issues that are thought to be usually there's a huge misconception that all public servants are dull, are unintelligent, and the reasons why Nigeria or other countries is the way it is because people are not smart. But in reality, when you go in, you find out that there are a lot of smart people already within government, but there are issues that people gloss over that are never really talked about. Right? And those are the issues that really stop us from developing. Okay? And I found many of those stories. I don't know whether I can talk about one of the stories that I feel, so in 2016, and this is a story in the book, in 2016, we woke up one morning to a Daily Trust headline that said Kaduna State has the most malnourished children in the whole of Nigeria. So, of course, we were all very surprised and sad, and the governor called an emergency meeting. And when he called that meeting, we all sat in the room, and he said, look, we need to deal with this issue. Let's set up an emergency team. We set up Kaduna Emergency Nutrition Action Plan. We put together 300 million, sent it to UNICEF to buy RUTF, which is like feeding for severely malnourished children. Put together a whole intervention. Everybody was geared up, spending money around that nutrition problem. So a few weeks later, I sat with my team, and then we tried to backtrack. Say, look, where did this information actually come from, right? And so we looked at the news report again, and the news report had quoted UNICEF, right? So UNICEF is credible now. So I went to the UNICEF office. So UNICEF, where did you get this information from? They said, oh, we got it from your Ministry of Health. I said, So I went back to the Ministry of Health, sat down, anyway, drilled down, found the nutrition officer. I know Phoebe knows her quite well, Jane. And I asked her, so where did you get this data from? And so she walked me through the data collection process, right? And I found out that, okay, so what happens is that they have nutrition officers in every local government that visit what they call the CMAM centers, severe acute malnutrition centers, who go on a daily basis and take the statistics of how many dead, how many hungry, how many have all the children that are there. So I then tried to go down. So I went to one of the villages, and I met the nutrition officer there. So, madam, please, can you show me how you do this thing? So she brought out her exercise book, one of these small exercise books that they give, and she showed me that every morning she would go to these CMAM centers and write, okay, this person, they brought in this number today, this one has exited the severe malnutrition center, this much have had RUTF and all of that. Now, because she needs to transmit this electronically to the headquarters, and she doesn't know how to use a computer, so her son, who's 17-year-old, still in secondary school, usually comes over the weekend, and he has a small beaten down computer where he helps her to input these figures, okay? And so what happens is that because he's not really clear on what information is actually required, he frequently used to transpose the rows for columns, okay? So instead of putting the data downwards, he would put it sideways, right? And so all the numbers were actually wrong, right? What he had captured was inverted. So he would send this to the Ministry of Health. Ministry of Health will send it to UNICEF. UNICEF will make fantastic looking graphs with it, right? And then it will end up on Daily Trust, and then 400 million naira spent on malnutrition, right? So a lot of these issues happen across not just Kaduna, but across Nigeria and across many developing countries. And so I tried to look at other countries as well in the book. How does South Africa do it? How does Mauritania? And try to have some general examples, because I think that if we don't get to the crux of these issues, then we'll continue having these developmental problems.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Usually I'm not that keen on reading books on economics and stuff like that, because I just love to delve myself into fiction. And many a times, these books can be quite boring. But that teacher's book, surprisingly, is very readable. It's not too heavy on the technicalities, So it's something that anybody would enjoy. You don't necessarily have to be an economist, which is really good. So I keep wondering how someone whose background is economics, they are known for being good at plotting graphs, can also be good at writing, because writing is really readable and smooth. So I would like to call on you to read a part of your book for us.
Okay.
Wait. There will be 2 readings, I hope, during this. So the first one would be the one that you can follow. Then he will do another reading of a favorite passage of his, of which you will not have access to until we do the grand launching, sometime before the end of the year.
Okay, so I'm going to read the first paragraph, actually, of the book, so don't worry, you have it. And maybe before I start, I would like to acknowledge my wife. She's right there in the middle. Can you stand up? Because I think she has read more drafts of the book than anybody. And I think she's a major player in the book. And so I'll just read the first part. A tap on my back roused me from sleep sometime in May 2015. I opened my eyes to find my wife staring at me. Her face was a mask of worry and concern. I checked my phone, it was just past 3 a.m., and it did not look like she had managed to get any sleep. Are you really sure about this? She asked. She knew the answer, yet she was making a determined final push to change my mind. I was sure. I was ready to leave the comfort of New York City for Kaduna, my home state in northern Nigeria. I had just accepted an appointment to serve as Commissioner for Budget and Planning in the cabinet of the newly elected Governor Katria Ahmed El-Rufai. I was sure it was time to leave the big picture view of the United Nations, where I had been working as a policy advisor in the Office of the Secretary General, and delve into granular details of how policy making at the subnational level affects the poorest amongst us. I was sure I wanted to make my mark on the lives of people back home, and I believed I had much to offer. Can I continue?
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's interesting. And not surprising that his wife would have reservations about coming back to Nigeria. Many times, a couple living abroad, especially for the wife, they feel a certain kind of sort of security from certain things. The women here will understand what I'm talking about. Okay? When they're abroad, the men, our men, tend to behave themselves, probably because they have no choice, you know? So I understand completely her reservation. And actually, they came back home, and what happened? What happened, happened. Eh? So, but that's part of life. Hafsa, I feel for you, but we're all in the same boat, aren't we? Okay. Let's get back
that
to
was just
serious
another
business.
disruption.
So the next thing I would like you to talk about, because I've read the whole book, and I know you've done a lot to disrupt the status quo in the States. But there's one thing that worries me. You know, governments change. So what have you done to ensure that these reforms that have been carried out will be sustainable?
Okay. Firstly, I would like to backtrack a little bit because you asked about the language of the book. And I must confess that the first draft was very technical. And I'm very happy that in the hall today, I think there are at least 4 people who helped me go through a number of the drafts. The first person is my older sister, Katria Ahmed, who did a lot of work on the initial draft. She read through and came back. My wife, of course, I've mentioned, she's a lawyer. She hates numbers. Most lawyers went to read law because they hate math. And so she tried to get me to tone it down. Richard Ali, who is also another lawyer, and a useless guy. but he did. And then, of course, Her Excellency, you know, I don't know whether this happens to a lot of authors, but when you write a book, it becomes like your child, right? And when I gave her the copy of the book, and I came back, she said, okay, I'm done with the first half, and then you can come and get it so that you can make the edits. I said, how can she be done with the first half and I can collect it? And then I went and I found out she had ripped it in 2. And I was so heartbroken that she had ripped the book in 2, but in every single page she had made very detailed and useful comments. Round of applause, please. And I went back and, you know, you discover that when you write something and you get so used to the text, because, I mean, I'd written this, kept it, there was a time I kept it for about 6 to 8 months, didn't even look at it. You know, it came back again. So a lot of the examples you'll see, I kept having to keep updating it because we started it. I think I had a complete first draft in 2020, but because of the edits and everything, and I think all of that really helped to tone down on the complexity of the book and the language to a point where I think the language is now quite free-flowing, and I'm happy that, sorry, and I didn't mention Abubakar Suleiman as well of Sterling Bank. He actually was the first person that read it cover to cover. And, you know, I don't know whether it happens to authors as well, that when you write something, I think the first time it goes out, your heart is literally at your neck because you're scared. People are going to hate it. People are going to diss it. And then when he sent me the email, of his own thoughts about the book, I had to print it, and it's still stapled on my reading corner because it was the first real encouragement that I got that this actually makes sense. What you're talking about makes sense. And I'd like to thank all those that have gone through the book. Regarding sustainability, I think what Malam has been able to do with Kaduna is not just to bring the shock to the system that has given us that ability to now change direction quickly and start actually seeing the gains, but to also really focus on how does this continue? And how has he done that? It's by the integration of the people, right? A lot of the people I see in the hall today are people that are here because they're also interested and see that pathway of a government that works. At least that's what I think. I see a lot of people here that have come up to me personally and have asked me details of some of the things that we did, either on infrastructure or education or healthcare. And I feel like the best form of sustainability is to empower the next group of people that are going to do it to be able to actually do it, right? So that's first, that inspiration of democratizing the ability to join government and policy making at the highest levels. As young as we were with the opportunities that he gave us, I think you can see people in government now that are even much, much younger than me, and you can see that there's some level of continuity. The second is the level of legislation that has been passed in the last 7 years, right? Unprecedented. over 200 pieces of legislation passed and signed by the government, right, that lock in a huge number of these issues that I try to raise in the book. And take the issue of infrastructure, for example, right? When we started discussing infrastructure really deeply in about 2016 and 17, one of the biggest challenges that we faced at the time was, look, Kaduna is not Lagos. We don't have that amount of money, right? We want to do a lot of development, but we have limited resources and limited scope of what to do. And when you come to do infrastructure as government, you have two pathways to choose, right? You can either choose to focus your attention, your resources on social infrastructure, right? Which is schools, hospitals, all those other things that private sector will never invest in, but that benefit huge amounts of people. Or you can decide to say, I'm going to go economic infrastructure. So the roads, the bridges, making the business environment friendly so that businesses come and invest. You can try to do the two at the same time, but it will reduce the resources for both. Now, that is a choice that every policymaker faces. It's a real choice, because when you go into a community, you're always wondering, should I build them more schools and hospitals? Or should we give them access roads to be able to come out, do business for people to be able to access? And each one of them, if you check the literature, there's huge amount of literature for you to do either, right? But the choice ultimately depends on what kind of government you want to run and what kind of people you are. And then what stage of development is your state. So, for example, you can choose, for the first 5 years of my governance, I'm going to focus my energy more on building the social infrastructure, right? Or I can say, look, I'm going to build the economic infrastructure, then the businesses are going to come and key in, build the economy, get me to collect taxes, and then I can do the social infrastructure. These are all different pathways for which I raise a number of issues that we deliberated on in the book, and some in a way that, you know, you get to understand the real choices. So it's not just about people in government are silly, people in government are stupid, but you'll be faced with real life issues, right, that you really have to take very difficult choices, because each one of them is a really good use of public resources, but you're just conflicted on which one will get you to where you need to go the farthest. In fact, one of the debates that we had, which was very interesting at the beginning of government, is, look, I mean, some of us watched Voiceless yesterday. All these remote villages that are so far away, right? 3 hours away from the capital, and you only have 20 households living there. Why do we not just get the entire village to relocate? Because imagine building a 200-kilometer road, right, which is going to cost you anything north of 10 billion, right, to go to reach 20 households, where you need to take hospitals, you need to take schools, you need to build security forces there. So why not just, quote unquote, move the village, right? These are real decisions and choices, because you can't even secure them. As we saw yesterday during the show, these remote villages are very tough to secure. We just finished a panel where we're told that there are only 5 policemen in an entire local government, right? Now you have a community that has just 20 houses. How do you handle that? So, and there's a huge literature, economic, on how you cluster development. Because all these dispersed communities, how do you take schools? How do you take hospitals? How do you take businesses there that people can thrive? So these are some of the tough choices that you really have to think about as you're coming into government or public space. And this is very, very critical, not just for people that are in government, people that are students, but even our international partners. So many times I sit with all these World Bank, United Nations, all of them, and you would think that in the room, they're so smart, they know all the answers, right? But when you break down a very simple issue to them, hard choices that we face on a daily basis, everything falls apart. Because what they're used to mainly is mostly one size fits all, right? I'm going to take education, put it with the same brush in every single community. But that is not correct. You see, if you take Nigeria, for example, Nigeria is more 2 or 3 countries put together, right? Because if you take maternal mortality, the number of women that die when they give birth to children, and you separate north from south, the southern part of Nigeria met the MDGs in the sense that number of women giving birth with a midwife there or some medical personnel there is almost 80%, right? But if you go to Kubau in Kaduna, right, number of women that give birth with somebody present is less than 5%. Okay, this was what we found at the beginning of the research. So if you decide as a Minister of Health, if somebody here is appointed Minister of Health today, and you want to save women from dying from childbirth, that approach of I'm going to send 200 women, midwives to every local government is not something that would work. Even within Kaduna, we have disparities. For example, family size in the southern part of Kaduna is 3 to 4. In zone 1, you're looking at 8 to 10. So the way that you design development is completely different in different parts of Nigeria, and that's part of the things that we have to take into context.
Thank you very much. I was just going to cut you short. You know, these politicians, once you give them a microphone, you know? So the second reading, I'm sure you have a favorite passage that you'd like to share with us.
I am going to take one of my very favorite topics, which is budgets. Budget season. Now, apologies to, I mentioned a few names in the book, and I'm sure they're not going to be happy with me. But budget season in Nigeria has many components, but the most amusing for me is the naming. When the presidents and governors submit their budget proposals for the next calendar year to the respective parliaments, they usually give it a name to underline what they consider to be the budget's overriding ambition. Most of the names are basic. Nobody remembers them the day after the budget presentation. Nigeria's 2022 budget, for example, was called the Budget of Economic Growth and Sustainability. The 2022 Kaduna budget was the Budget for Sustainable Growth. Simple enough, right? But a few governors get very creative with this naming. One of the most highly anticipated budgets is that of Cross River State. in the South-South political zone of the country. The names given to the state's budget is comedy gold. In 2016, the Cross River governor, Ben Ayade, a former university professor, an environmental microbiologist, christened his first budget the budget of deep vision. In 2017, it was the budget of infinite transposition. In 2018, he called it the budget of kinetic crystallization. And in 2019, it was the budget of Kabbalistic densification. After his re-election in 2019, he presented the first budget of his second term and named it the budget of Olympotic Meristemasis. And then in 2021, and this is the best, the Cross River budget was named the budget of blush and bliss. The 2022 budget was conjugated agglutination. So I think that, this chapter is quite funny and interesting, but I want to just give a short story about budgets in Kaduna. When we came in 2015, Malam had called me to his office and said, look, Muhammad, I think we need to significantly change the way that Kaduna does its spending. And he took a document and gave it to me. Go and read up about zero-based budgeting. So I went over the weekend, I read it and everything, and by Monday I came back to him with a plan. Now, what is zero-based budgeting? Basically, it's very simple. Imagine your wife, not my wife, your wife, brings to you the household chepane list, what do you call it in English? The shopping list, right? The grocery list. And every day, there are some items that remain on that shopping list, right? Tomatoes, 500 naira. Pepper, 200 naira. Cornflakes, 10,000 naira, blah. Right? And it's a list of, let's imagine, 10 things. The next month, she brings the same list and then adds maybe 20% for inflation, right? The next month, she brings the same list and then adds 20% for another inflation. And then I find that we are now buying sausages, but the sausage wasn't in the budget, right? What has happened? It means that 20%, there's some savings there that are being reallocated. Cool? And then she stops asking me for fuel for the car. It means that there's some 20% there that is also being misapplied, right? And then she stops asking me for money for Ashobi. There's another 20% that has been misappropriated. Cool? So basically what used to happen in Kaduna was we found that from 2001, it was the same budget, same thing, no difference. The only thing that happens from year to year is they add 20%. So if you take the 2001 budget and the 2015 budget, it's just 20% multiplied by 15, and then that's what everything is. Now what happens when you do that is that sometimes roads that have even been completed, you still find them there. Problems that used to exist. For example, there was a strike force base that used to be funded by the government of 2001. That strike force base had long been abandoned, right? There was no nothing there, no formation, but every single year the state government was still putting money towards that strike force base, right? Your guess is as good as mine what is happening really to the money, okay? And this is the same thing, I'm giving Kaduna as an example, but this is the same thing that still happens across Nigeria and even in the federal budget, okay? So with the zero-based budget, what we just said was that, look, we're starting from a clean slate. There's nothing on the budget, it's a clean page. You then, every single ministry has to come and justify for us why everything must be on there. So rather than taking something that was there 15, 20 years ago and adding 20% every year, we're starting from a clean slate. The civil servants were so angry. They were so angry. Because the way that you see, when we go around Kaduna now, you know, some people have real estate, go? Some people have real estate in the budget that you cannot touch. So the budget for Strike Force is a group of Abdul Karim and his people. Okay? Who own that piece of real estate? Okay? The budget for agricultural fertilizer is another group. So cabals had formed around the budget of the state. And if you touch anything, because they were the ones that used to get it. And that was what the political settlement for the state was. That's how everybody was kept calm. I won't touch your thing in the budget, remain calm. Okay? So when we did the first zero-based budget in 2015, if you remember that year, the radio was crazily against the government. Everybody was abusing the governor. I, of course, At that time, they still thought, okay, this is one boy that was brought from America, doesn't know how to speak Hausa, he's useless. It's the governor that is, I wasn't an issue. So they went after the governor significantly, right? And it was mainly because these pieces of real estate were touched. Okay? Now, when we added on the data issue, now, if you go back to this, one of the other things that we did around this same thing was, we then said for every single school, because the way that you fund education in state governments is that when you jack up the number of students and you jack up the number of schools, then government has to send money to cater for all those schools, right? So what used to happen? The Commissioner for Education would ensure that the education numbers are always very, very high. But when you go to the school, you can't find the teachers that are being talked about. The schools are fake, and the students are fake.
The teacher.
Yes,
sorry to interrupt you. But if you tell them all these stories, who's going to buy the book? So I think you've done enough expo for today. Thank you very much. Before we start the Q&A, there's something I want the audience to help us with. We've done a lot of work on the book, and we're basically about ready to go to the final print. But can you show them? There's something that has been giving me sleepless nights. Can you hold this one? Which color should we use? We want a voting. Yeah, Lola, come and do the vote.
Okay.
Please don't be biased by the fact that we did the pamphlets in red. It was just yeah.
We're gonna do a quick vote here. If you like the white one, put your hand up. Where are the volunteers? You are supposed to be counting. You are voting. Huh? Okay, you count the ones over here. You count the ones over here. This is how democracy is working in this country. This is how we'll know. Oh yeah. Okay. 28, 27, 28 plus 27, 50, 53, 53, 55 plus 20. White. That's 75. Can somebody write that down for me, please? White, 75. Okay, red. $10 here, 13 here, that's 23, 14, 23 plus 14, 37, right? Red, 37. Black. Count it. It's a democracy. Wow. Black, go. You have to take out black. Wow. 25 here. Yes. 55. How can this be 20? Black, put your hand up here. Just this one. Okay. How many of you voted twice? Be honest. Let us be sincere with ourselves.
But black, but red is the least favorite.
All right. What's the total for black? has come to my attention that there is rigging in this. $55, right? 55. You're doing the calculation here. 20, that's 75. 20, it's 100. Black it is.
Okay.
They want us to do a rerun.
Eh?
Rerun.
Oh, what is the formal tally now?
Eh?
What's the tally?
So,
Red.
where is it?
Black. That was our least favorite.
100.
That was our least favorite.
Can you imagine?
So,
Thank you.
according to INEC, white 75. We will not take it. Red 37. Black 93.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your participation. Although I forgot to announce a caveat which I should have announced before. Yes. We are very appreciative, but we are not legally bound to follow. So thank you very much. Before we do the Q&A, I want to use this opportunity to plug in my new publishing company, Almara Publishers. Our mission is to expose the world to literature from underrepresented voices. Because I find that in Nigeria, the literature that is more well known is basically from one part of the country, and I think in the north here we have very talented people that we need to support. Thank you. So we have 12 minutes for the Q&A, but I'm sure Lola will give us some extra time if it's needed. So, okay. I will go the opposite of Kaderia and favor the men. Okay, let me start with Mr. Leme.
Thank you. Advantage of sitting on front and coming early. Thank you. My question is on two subject matters, decision and transition. I want to know how you arrive at the decision finally to leave the comfort of New York and come back to Kaduna and serve in government. As a young person, I'm also young. I'm not 35 yet. and I've spoken to a lot of people, even in your government, that it seems to be doing well and encouraging young people. A lot of them are saying after this, they're not willing to continue. So I want to know how you arrive at that. And even after you came, if you are to make that decision again, are you going to do it? And transition, she addressed you earlier as a politician, which you are about to transition into. How easy it is for you to transition into that side of life? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think that question, the decision, is really what I tried to address in the first chapter, because I remember, and if you read the first chapter, you see that I'd frequently get into taxis in New York, and as soon as they know I'm Nigerian, they start the teasing. What's happening in your country? That time Boko Haram was bombing everywhere. We had just had the Patience Jonathan's salvo. I can't remember what it is now. Oh my God, I miss Patience. There is God, oh. So all of that stuff had happened. And I just felt that there's tons of very smart people in New York. I wouldn't really be missed. And I really just believed in Malam and what he stood for, what he'd done before. And I just wanted to be part of what he was going to do here in Kaduna. And I think that the hero of that decision is really not me. I think it's my wife, because I was coming back to some level of certainty, and Commissioner, no matter how you cut it, is still a very good position, but she was not coming back to that certainty. Her kids were going to be taken out of really nice schools, and the other day I was speaking to them, and they've lost completely their accent. They sound very Hausa, and they were watching videos of themselves, and Abdurrahman was, I can't believe that's me. This is how I used to talk. And she just glared at me, see what you have done. So, but the decision was difficult, but regarding would I do it again, absolutely. I think absolutely, because I think that I'm very, very proud of the Kaduna that we've built today. I'm very, very proud of it. I wouldn't change it for the world. I just feel like I would want to do so much more, because I feel like the impact that we've had here, we couldn't have done it working anywhere else, basically. So I think that I'm quite happy with that decision. I would encourage as many people as possible, and I think that's partly why I chose to write it, because many people come to me and say, we're not sure this government thing, but I feel like, honestly, for me, was really fulfilling, despite the cost. The benefit, if you look at it, especially not from a personal standpoint, but from a communal standpoint and where our country is, and being able to create the lessons is really good. Then on the transition to being an unemployed politician, which is how I introduce myself now. I'm an unemployed politician, really trying. It's difficult because I am getting used to the point of when there's a 10 a.m. meeting, it's actually 12 p.m. or 1. So those things, you get in there and they distinguish, why are you coming too early now? Nobody is here. And that's the political space, because it's less structured, right? But I'm also looking at the end, because I feel like politics is a means to an end, the end of which is to be able to serve a much bigger range of people, and that's why we're doing it.
Thank you very much. I think there's something important that you should also do. I think you should start and head the anti-Japa movement. Yes, for people to come back and stay in Nigeria. Okay, strings.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I'm a very big fan of yours. I want to be like you when I grow up. So, I must commend that you start your book with data first. So being an analyst, being a data analyst myself, I'm interested to know, before assuming office, what structure was there for data collection and data analysis, and then seeing the transformation of Kaduna from when you assumed office till now. What role has data played in your policy formations and implementations as well? So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that question is so important. For us, I think data was everything. And we've carried it not only to governance, but also to politics. And really that's what sets Malam's politics apart from everyone else. It's very, very data-centric. It's very, with the lens that we've gone, you cannot imagine. But let me stick to the policy part. When we came in fact, you'll see in the second chapter, the first meeting I had at budget, I was like, okay, look, who are we serving? I was at Ministry of Planning and Budget, right? Which is where all the eggheads of the state are. The first person said, we have 7 million people in Kaduna. The other person said 10 million, right? Now the gulf between that and how you plan for that is completely different. When you read Wikipedia at that time, it told you that Kaduna was an agrarian economy. Most of the people, everybody, but we found out that all those things are incorrect. right? So we invested, in fact, one of the major investments that we made in 2015, we launched the data revolution, right? Put in a huge amount of money, and we started rivaling even the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics. If you sit with Yemi Kale, he will tell you that, we were really at their heels. Kaduna was the only state government that went to the United Nations in 2017 and presented the SDG report, which had huge number of indicators that even countries across the world did not have. And it's because we invested so much in data. So today, if you go to Kaduna Bureau of Statistics, just down the road, 5 minutes from here, every single data point that you want on population demographics, on the stratification of society, on gross domestic product of Kaduna, on how the economy is structured, all of that is available, and only in Kaduna out of all the 36 states.
Now it must be a woman. Unfortunately. Oh my God. Where? Where are the women? Okay, you. Yeah?
Good afternoon. You've been in government for a very long time, and you spoke about when a new government comes into power, they have to choose, they have two choices, either choosing the social infrastructure or the economic development. And I just wanted to know, in the social infrastructure, particularly public primary schools all over Kaduna State, why hasn't there been any development in any? Because the kids, yes, I have seen some, but most of the kids are on the floor. Most of the kids don't have toilets, don't have libraries, and they're in really bad condition. And I just wonder, why hasn't the government done anything about that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think this is another place where it's really important to discuss scale, right? The first 3-4 years of our government, I used to meet people on the road, and they would say, one group would tell me, you guys are doing such a fantastic job and all of that. I've seen so much and all of that, right? And we would say thank you. And then another group, I would see them and say, you guys are not doing anything. You've not done anything. And I'll still say thank you and accept. And both of them are correct. And the reason they're both correct is that in Kaduna we have about 4,600, I think at the time, public primary schools. 4,600 public primary schools, okay? So imagine you want to focus on schools, right? Each school will cost you an average, if you want to do it really well, of between 20 and 30 million naira, right? Now, if you take 20 and 30 million naira and do it 1,000 times, how much does that rack up to? Over 3 billion or 30 billion? My math is wrong. 30 billion, right? So imagine, so for the places that we've done, the communities that we've gone to, they'll come out usually and say, you guys have done everything for us, right? For the places that we haven't gone, of course, you would complain and because we try to ensure spread, maybe in the local government you would find that we've done 5 or 10 really good schools, right? But if you multiply that across the states, that's 230. I know for a fact that we've done over 700, right, schools. That's a huge amount of money when you put it on the budget. Huge amount, unprecedented, never been done. But when you minus it from the 4,600, it's still a drop in the ocean. And that's why the other part of this conversation, that government is a continuum. When you do the 700, you then hand over to the next person to do the 700 and hope that he will, right? And then when you do so one of the things that we did in 2015 was that we did an education emergency, which had to do with infrastructure and furniture. we crashed the furniture space in Kaduna because we were so intent on giving Kaduna people, but after we released money, we gave them 50% of the money. Many of them could not meet up. You remember that if you're driving around Kaduna at that time, every single welder was busy doing our chairs. What happened? At least 30 to 40% of those chairs ended up breaking in the first 6 months because of that capacity, and they didn't have the money to do more. So all these things are things that you learn as you do development.
All these things we're discussing are very, very important, and I think we can go on and on and on, but unfortunately time is not on our side. Thank you very much, Muhammad Sani Betijo. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you.